I think South Carolina likes their chances a lot better if they have them. So you don't obviously don't want to rush them back. Concussion's not an injury to play with lightly, per se. But again, it's something you do want to make sure that's fully fleshed out again, because it's easy to get another one, like you said, Tyler. And then you look at guys like Tua and whatnot. You never want to put the poor kid in that situation. So again, you take it as easy as possible, but and then like I said, I think it could do the kid some good to have just an outside look at this week, just to reset, refresh, and be good. So we'll have to see. Again, you like your chances if you're South Carolina, though, if you've got them.
Yeah, I think if you told everybody right now with 100% certainty Sellers is going to play, they feel pretty good about it, and they say if he doesn't play, then your concern level goes up quite a bit. And again, that's no disrespect to Luke Doty or whatever, but there's a reason why Sellers is the special quarterback that he is, because when he's playing at his best, he is as good as anybody, if not better than anybody in the country. And we certainly hope to see that this upcoming weekend as, again, we wait for this offense to hopefully kind of click into gear a little bit.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. A lot of the consistency things, are stemming from Lenoir's too. So again, like that's what I'm saying. I think if he does have the week off, it could be a good thing, right? And it doesn't put you completely out of this football game. Luke Doty's done some good things too. But for Lenoir's to again reset, like I said, there was so much hype going into the season after those first 2 wins about him, and it can be a lot to manage, can be a lot to be on your shoulders. So I think if he is out, it'd be a good opportunity to reset and really get his legs about him and really figure out how he wants to finish out this season. Because even though he was concussed and all that, I think you'd take a step back, even with an injury. So it's going to give him some time, certainly, to recoup. But that's if he's not playing. Like if he does have the week off this week, I think it could be some good. But as of now, it seems like all systems go.
Yeah, going to be a big game regardless for South Carolina as they try and get themselves to at least 500 in conference play after dropping their first SEC game to Vanderbilt this past week. And this is also the SEC opener for Missouri. And Dave, if I could get you to tab back over to yesterday's cut list, I want to get cut number 31. This is Eli Drinkwitz talking about the importance of the SEC opener for Missouri.
Yeah, I think as you elevate your program, we talk about being 1-0 every week and the importance of a nameless, faceless opponent. And last week I think was the focus was not to allow our opponent to dictate our preparation or performance, and I thought our guys really responded to that. Our guys understand the significance of playing in the SEC. They understand that the level of competition raises, the importance of all the little things rises. They understand the importance of being 1-0. This week. I don't really think we have to hammer that or say that. I think that's been the enhanced growth of the program over the last 3 years. It's a SEC night game. We've only had 3 since 2021, while others in the league have had way more than that. It's an awesome opportunity for us to take advantage of that. And but the reality of it is the separations in the preparation you put in this week, and the most important thing we can control is have toughness Tuesday, not trying to play on emotions on Saturday.
By the way, is there any better coaching cliche than being 1-0 every single week?
Yeah, Brian Kelly's 0-0 every week.
Yeah, that's pretty good too. I feel like we hear the 1-0 across the board a lot more.
Absolutely. Do your job. The famous Bill Belichick 1-2, but no, yep. I agree. 1-0 is always a good one. And Eli, sounding off the cusp there for sure. It sounds like he's a little petty about the night game thing. I don't know. South Carolina plays a lot of them, so maybe that could be a shot. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe so. And when you kind of look at both head coaches in this matchup, neither one is spectacular in SEC openers. Coach Beamer, as we touched on yesterday, 1-3 in his first SEC game, now 1-4 in his first SEC game, to start off the season. That one win coming last year when, of course, they went on the road and beat Kentucky. For Eli Drinkwitz, has not been much better, only 2-3, and I think those last 2 wins in the past 2 years have come against Vanderbilt teams that, maybe they didn't quite stack up to how good this one's could be this year. So it's been a challenge for both these guys to come out of the gate in terms of winning that first game, but vitally important, obviously, for South Carolina to win it just to keep your hopes alive, right? You know what I mean? You dropped to 0-2 in the SEC. I mean, you're talking at that point about struggling to get into bowl eligibility, and especially considering how tough the remaining schedule is for South Carolina. You can't afford to fall in that kind of hole. And for Missouri, who, again, has had a couple of back-to-back double-digit win seasons. We don't know how good they are overall this year, but certainly getting off on the right foot in SEC play, considering how light their schedule is, all things considered in the SEC, could certainly be a big benefit to them.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. Again, I think the fact that they got South Carolina off of this Vanderbilt loss in Como is big, because I think if this game were at Williams-Brice, it'd be a little different. I think this team would be a little hungrier. But again, it's such a long road trip out to Como, and you're dealing with banged up Lenore Sellers, the whole questionable. And yes, he's been practicing, but that doesn't guarantee anything. I think. Again, this is a typical Eli Drinkwitz, opening SEC week, if you will. Big chance for him. But, South Carolina is hungry, and it wouldn't put it past him to go up there and, per se, upset him.
I did notice this when looking over Missouri's schedule yesterday, a very interesting scheduling quirk. They have their first 6 games at home. They will not leave Missouri to go on the road until October the 18th, a month from now, because they got UMass next week. They'll have a bye week, and then they'll play Alabama. So their first road trip is not until October 18th when they play Auburn. There's been a lot of weird scheduling quirks over the years. I've never seen one team start the year with 6 straight home games.
Yeah, that's weird, Tyler, right? I don't know. The atmosphere up there in Como's gotten better, I guess. Long over are the days where you barely see anybody on that hill. It's going to be jammed this weekend. And so it's I don't know, Tyler. That's weird. South Carolina's certainly playing a lot of home games, but then again, you got to go on the road this week. So I don't know. It seems very Eli Drinkwitzy, I guess that's his version of scheduling. The Kurt Signetti, Indiana State, and a cupcake back to back. So I guess playing on your home field's the SEC equivalent. I don't know, Tyler. Certainly helps them, but would be a big opportunity for South Carolina to go up there and shock them too, getting them used to playing on their home field for sure.
Well, and I think it would be a big confidence boost considering some of the tough road trips you're going to have to make this year. Going to LSU, you're going to have to go to College Station. You're going to have to go to Ole Miss. Obviously, LSU's at the top of the list of that. Playing in Death Valley is obviously one of the biggest challenges in all of college football. But if you can at least get off on the right foot in a place like Como, a place that has not treated you well at all over the years, then hopefully that instills confidence that, hey, there's no environment that's too intimidating for this team. Because, again, to have some kind of good season, you're going to have to win a lot of these games on the road this year.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. It comes down, the SEC pretty much comes down to success on the road, right? Shane Beamer talked about it yesterday in his presser. If you're a competitor, you have to like playing on the road. And plenty of road tests for the South Carolina team this year. This Missouri game is no exception. It's big, bumbling, stumbling Mizzou, and you got to be ready. You got to be disciplined to go get a win. So, Missouri's certainly ready for it. So South Carolina has to be too.
We'll take a listen to what Clayton White had to say yesterday and how important defense is going to be in this one coming up on Saturdays. They take on a very potent Missouri offense from what we've seen so far this year. That's coming up next. It is the Halftime Show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. It's out at Joe Machika, Captain Dave, on your Thursday on the game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Manchica, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Thursday on the game, taking a look at the Missouri Tigers ahead of South Carolina's matchup with them coming up on Saturday night. Kickoff at 7 o'clock, which, of course, you can listen to right here on the game with Gamecocks Game Day, starting things off with myself and Elijah Campbell Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. We'll be live out at O'Hara's in Lexington, by the way, for that show, so come by and see us if you can. And one of the biggest things every time South Carolina takes on Missouri is trying to contain the rushing attack of the Tigers. And in the 4 prior matchups in the Beamer era, Missouri has ran for 258, 143, 213, and 144. Now, those numbers have not been adjusted for the sacks because Nate Noel did run for $150 last year against South Carolina. But regardless, Missouri always finds success running the football against South Carolina. That shouldn't be there shouldn't be any other game plan for them different this year because they've got perhaps the fiercest running back in all of college football right now in Ahmad Hardy.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. That's what you get with Missouri. Eli Drinkwitz is going to bring in a tough running game, good offensive line, and force this defense to be disciplined, right? We've seen in years past where Beamer's teams have gone up there and the defense hadn't been playing well or you had a situation where, you were dinged up, you had a depth situation and you couldn't play disciplined football. But yeah, Ahmad Hardy certainly no exception to the Missouri line of talented running backs. I can remember, Tyler Beatty gave you a big game. Cody Schrader gave you a big game as well. So, this defense has to be ready. But I think fortunate enough for South Carolina right now, this defense, after Vanderbilt, what they were lacking was tackling skills and a little bit of discipline. And those are 2 things that they can fix. So I think this defense isn't like years past. It has been when you've gone up to Como, you're kind of charting off this defense. But I think right now, they're still nasty. They're still mean. They can still play, good disciplined football. They and certainly got their lumps in last week, you would hope.
Well, you're going to have to play disciplined against that outside zone rushing attack that Missouri employs so well. This will be cut number 14 here, Dave. This is Clayton White, Gamecocks defensive coordinator, yesterday talking about that outside zone run.
Yes, they've done a really good job of adding pieces to that puzzle. Truly believe that that offense is hard to defend mainly because of the practice trying to get the reps during the week. So our offensive is doing a really good job of replicating those plays. That's the only way to really have a chance to go out there and really contain those kind of numbers, like you said. But most importantly, we have to practice right and then kind of start really in January, kind of just emphasizing that different style of offense.
It's certainly something different, and it's one that's going to force you to kind of be perfect on the outside. And, last week was a big area of concern for South Carolina when it came to the missed tackles they had against that option type of run scheme that, that Vanderbilt was using. And there's some similarities in terms of trying to get guys out in space and that kind of stuff that you're going to see Missouri try and use this upcoming weekend, which forces you to be almost perfect on the defensive side of football, staying in your gaps, maintaining your assignments, and having good eye discipline, which is something else, cut number 21 here, Dave, that Clayton White talked about yesterday.
Obviously, really going against offense of any kind of offense, you got to have, great eye discipline. Vanderbilt presents more problems. Missouri presents their own problems in regards of how they hide plays and how they hide players and certain concepts that they do. So you got to be really locked into where you're looking at and know your progression. Either is it 3-2, 2-1, 1-2, or guard the flow, or running back, tight end, tackle, whatever their read is, you got to be great. You got to understand what's the next progression. We're teaching it all the time. We do a great job of just obviously keep teaching that part of the game because it's the hardest part for these guys to understand. They want to sometimes just go out there and just play the game and find the football, but sometimes these offenses do give you some keys if you just understand your progression, and it'll put you in the right spot.
And most of this running game has gone through Ahmad Hardy, but don't forget that Beau Pribula is a quarterback capable of running the ball as well, and that's something that he did a lot of the time when he was thrust into duty last year at Penn State, or the past couple years at Penn State, and had a couple touchdowns to account for it. Now, they've not used him maybe on as high of a clip on a game-by-game basis as maybe you would have thought through the first 3 games. Does have 3 rushing touchdowns so far this year with a couple of long runs. So he's certainly capable of hurting you with his feet, and this could be a situation where I feel like maybe they haven't broken that out quite yet, and that's something that Carolina could see for the first time coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I think they have to be ready for everything, right? I think if the Vanderbilt prep didn't teach them anything, like you have to be disciplined and be ready to read your key and then go. So based on the way that Clayton White described this defense, a lot of guys are ready to go find the football. They're gonna lean more. Their specialty's gonna lean more a little bit in the run defense category, and you know how good South Carolina's secondary has been under Torian Gray, so you don't necessarily need to get worried about that now. But again, I think what the biggest challenge for this defense, like Clayton White just said, again, it's reading your keys, finding your keys, doing your job. And then also Tyler, like you mentioned too, Bo Perbula hasn't really been in the offense as much, with the design run game. I expect I like everyone out there, and yourself expect, Drinkwitz to roll out Perbula and get him more involved in this run game. What does that mean for this defense? I mean, it gives you a shot, at the quarterback if you take it smartly and you want to add the bumps and bruises. You want to make Bo Perbula think again before trying to extend a run over the middle, right? You want to hit him legally, obviously, and whatnot. This game requires big, mean, physical defense, and you're going to have to drag this one out, Tyler.
And when you have a running game as good as Missouri's is, that extends drives. And it's no surprise that they're the best in the SEC when it comes to time of possession. They've run the third most plays in the country so far this year, averaging 89 of those a game. And the thing about it is, it's not like they're running a lot of up-tempo stuff and snapping the ball, 10, 12 seconds apart. They're 93rd in tempo overall. They're about 28 seconds between plays. They're just having such long drives, it's hard to get them off the field. They've had 35 drives this year. 12 of them have gone for more than 10 plays. They control the clock very much in a similar type of way to the way Vanderbilt did last week, where when you're South Carolina offensively, that puts the pressure on you because you don't know how many possessions you're going to get. When you do give the ball back to them, you have no idea how long it's going to be until you get the ball back. So you could be talking about maybe only like 4 possessions once again in the first half of this one, to where you got to make those things count, because even just one turnover or 1 3 and out could be the difference in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyler, glad you brought that up, because again, like last year's game felt, similar, where, football becomes more cinematic, I guess, or more, more suspenseful when teams are trading drives. There's less drives in the football game, so you have to be the most opportune with the ones that you have. And I felt like last year's game was similar. It was, cinema, because the drives were so limited, and you kind of felt like, oh, you have to do what you can do, because both teams are going to run the clock and run the football enough to where, it's going to limit drives. I think if South Carolina's offense is operating efficiently, it is similar to where, they're running the football efficiently. You're getting those chunk plays to set up 3rd and short. I think, these offenses look kind of similar, in terms of the way that they want to, execute things. But, again, this defense, you have to be conditioned, Tyler. These guys are probably, tired of conditioning at this point. And I can imagine Clayton White is having them ready to play a lot more football than they're used to, I guess, to this point. So, yeah, have to be ready, have to be well conditioned for sure.
Is Missouri going to try and get inside Dylan Stewart's head? We'll talk about that coming up next, as well as what Mike Shula had to say about the offense yesterday when asked a similar question to what was asked from Coach Beamer earlier on in the week. That's coming up next. It is the Halftime Show, presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, Joe Machika, on your Thursday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Want to let you know, coming up here in about 10 minutes, your next chance to win $1,000 thanks to our national cash contest giveaway that we're going to be doing here for the next little bit. Make sure you're listening out for that keyword coming up here in about 10 minutes and text it to 95819 for your chance to win $1,000 in our cash contest. Again, keep your ears out about 10 minutes from now for that next key word. We're talking about the defense there in the last segment. Of course, the most important guy on the defense for South Carolina is Dylan Stewart, who had a little bit of an aggravating night last weekend against Vanderbilt. And I thought an interesting question was posed to Clayton White yesterday. Cut number 19 here, Dave. Was Dylan Stewart getting held and it wasn't getting called?
I can't answer that, but I feel like, he's a dynamic pass rusher. He's a known pass rusher, and sometimes he has to get held in order for him not to get a sack. So, but they're not calling it, so we can't make no excuses for anybody. We got to do a great job of coaching the and ones. You're going to get fouled when you go shoot layup, so you got to fight through the layup, get an and one.
I'm sure Clayton White had to hold his tongue a little bit on that one, because I'm sure there was an answer that he wanted to give that he knew that he couldn't give, because there were certainly some examples last week where you saw Stewart maybe getting held on to a little bit, and you're like, probably could have been a flag, but it wasn't. Didn't get called, as he said. You just have to deal with it, either way. But it was part of what led to a very aggravating day for Dylan Stewart overall.
Yeah, Tyler, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. This is a fancy way of saying yes, he is getting held. And absolutely everybody can see it. I don't know why Dylan Stewart isn't getting you see these superstar calls that some of these guys get. Like, it's ridiculous. They're coming off the edge and they just flail their arms and it's a holding. Like, it's crazy. I don't know if it's because of, the penalties or what, but some of these refs, I don't know if they have it out for him or they're just like missing the whole, thinking he's like too good of a player that, oh yeah, he's good enough, he'll get through it. Or they just want to, like Clayton White said, he would get more sacks, but you have to hold him essentially.
Yeah.
Yes, Tyler. Yes, he is saying yes. And I think everybody knows it. I would think he would get, a little bit more of the superstar calls there with the holdings and whatnot. I don't know.
Well, and it's interesting because last weekend, again, was frustrating for him in a lot of ways. They consistently ran away from Dylan Stewart to the opposite side of the field, and obviously it ended up working out for them. But when you're the star player and you're not getting fed guys coming to your side, that's got to bug you a lot. And again, last year, it was kind of a pick your poison, right? You're like, okay, we can either run towards Dylan Stewart, who's this freak, phenomenal freshman, or run towards the guy that's eventually going to win the Bronco Nagurski Award, and Kyle Kennard on the other side. It's like, all right, either way, you're going to have to suffer the consequences. And Brian Thomas Jr. is certainly a viable pass rusher on the other side, but he has not earned that game wrecker status that makes people want to run away from him yet. Like, again, they're more concerned with Dylan Stewart on the other side. So a lot of things I imagine this weekend are going to go to the left when it comes to Missouri and running the football. So you had that last week with Vanderbilt that led to some frustration. There was the trash talk during the week. Bryce Henderson calling Dylan Stewart, he's whatever. And Stewart had the situation where he took a couple extra steps and shoved Diego Pavia, which ended up leading to a roughing the passer call. And then later on in the game, he gets into a war of words and whatever else with Bryce Henderson and gets himself kicked out of the game because of that. And again, that probably fell right into Vanderbilt's game plan of, hey, if we can get this guy to self-destruct on himself and take himself out, that's going to benefit us. Now, the game was already well in hand at that point in time, so it didn't really affect the outcome. But I got to imagine Missouri's looking around this week, like in their offensive line room, stuff like that, like, hey, if we can get inside this guy's head and make him do something dumb to get himself kicked out of the game, that'll benefit us greatly.
Yeah, and it's something they're certainly taking note of. I think if you listen to Brian Thomas Jr., it was after the game on Saturday, he was mentioning that he talked to Dylan about it, after the game, and they're working on it, right? You can't get too involved. We know Dylan Stewart is such a passionate player, plays, with a chip on his shoulder and his heart on his sleeve. So he's got to, and his position is naturally so. Like, you have to be aggressive. You have to want to go every single play. Like, you're not going to get a victory on every single play. So you got to be ready to go. But so I don't know, Tyler, it's a tricky situation, and you can't tell the kid to turn down the emotions, because that's what makes him so great. That's what makes him so hungry. You know, the scary movie type of Dylan Stewart that everyone around here knows and loves. So I think it's a tricky situation. You probably, the thing that I would tell him is, like, you try to limit the smack talk in game. You know, go about your business, focus on your own game, because you could wreck the game enough. And I think maybe that's where some of the refs aren't giving him the calls per se, because, you know, you think it's all is fair in love and war when guys are chipping back and forth. You know, you got to make the play there. So I don't know, Tyler, it's a tricky situation, and you hope you can just point it out to the officials enough to where, you know, they can start giving you some more calls.
Yeah, and you're right. You don't want to be in a situation where you're dialing back your best defensive player to prevent him from, you know, making a mistake or saying something he shouldn't say and get himself kicked out, because again, it's that aggression and intensity that helps him be as good of a player as he is. But again, now that teams kind of know that they can get inside his head, I imagine they're going to be trying to poke that bear quite a bit this upcoming year. So hopefully he holds his composure and everything ends up working out for him on Saturday. As man, if he can get back there and put a lot of pressure on Beau Pribula and force him into mistakes, then hopefully the Carolina defense can have a good day and the Gamecocks can walk out of there with a victory.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I think if Dylan Stewart, you know, is himself and, you know, all calls are called and everything, I think, you know, that's going to disrupt the run game a lot. Brian Thomas Jr. will have some help. And so, you know, it'll be interesting to see. I can tell you that they're working on it, right? Dylan Stewart, sure. This is the development of a young talent at defensive end, especially. You know, I feel like this is going to iron itself out. He's got too many good coaches around him. T-Rob also being back at the facility, hat tip to him. Congratulations to him being back at the facility. But yeah, Sterling Lucas, they're definitely working on it. He's got the vets telling him, and you know, you hope that this is shored up. But the frustrations are certainly understood.
So the story of this team this week, at least, is not the defense. It is the offense. And Mike Shula, everybody anticipating what he was going to say this week, was asked a similar question to what Beamer was asked earlier on in the week in terms of, you know, running the same type of plays they did a year ago where they had a lot more success on offense under Dow Loggins. This would be cut number 7 here, Dave. Here is Mike Shula's response to the question about if the plays are the same from last year.
Yeah, I would say there's a, you know, when you offensively, there's a lot of, you know, you work in the off season or training camp, things like that, to have kind of a core set of plays, running game wise, passing game wise, whether or not it's whoever's running the ball, running backs, quarterbacks, whatever, and then you try to build off that with variations. And I think, you know, all through my career and in every offense I've been in, I think offenses have that. You have a base and a foundation, and then you have, you know, variations off that, whether or not it's a similar run with a different add-on, so to speak, or same exact run with a different formation, or same run with the same formation.
And Chris Clark had a really good write-up on Gamecock Central about what's been a part of the Gamecocks playbook so far this year in terms of the optional run plays, the you know, how often, you know, Sellers was scrambling, and there's some difference in the numbers for sure, but the opportunities are there. He's just not taking as many of those opportunities, which goes back to what Beamer said earlier on in the week, and some of that is, you know, again, defenses keying in and saying, hey, 16's the best player. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that 16 doesn't beat us, so we're going to key in on him, make sure he doesn't take the ball and take off running. There's also the part of him trying to become a better quarterback where he's not as quick to flush the pocket as he was a year ago, though you did have some crazy, incredible plays during that time, but he is trying to get, you know, stay in there, fight through it, and try and get some plays downfield through the passing game. But there's no doubt about it, regardless if the plays are same or not, when Sellers runs, this offense does better, and we just have not, unfortunately, seen enough of that so far this year.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And I mean, I would think if he plays this week and he's banged up, I wouldn't see himself, why would you put him in harm's way, especially after concussion? You know, it's not like those guys are aiming for the head or anything, but it's football. The head gets hit sometimes, you know, and a lot of, we were talking yesterday even too, you know, a lot of that comes from the ground, right? You know, head hitting the ground, all that. So I don't know, like if this week would be the week, if he does play, if you're going to see it open up, right? I doubt it. simply because he's been banged up. But again, I think we talk about the development of a young superstar in Dylan Stewart. Talk about the development of Lenoir Sellers, right? Again, that Vanderbilt kind of halted all of the hype that was rolling in that blowout. And again, he gets some fresh perspective here, to kind of change things up where he needs to grow as a quarterback even more so. Because again, with all that hype and while you're winning, it can be a little blinding to see some of the more glaring issues. So if he does play, I think he's still learning a lot. But even if he doesn't, certainly going to have the full scope of everything as well. But I wouldn't see them opening up the playbook or him necessarily taking off the week after an injury like he did.
Well, and if he's not going to be, if he's going to be used even less in the running game this weekend due to the status of his injury and stuff like that, this is all that more important for everybody around him to step up on offense. Offensive line, Faison, the wide receivers, the tight ends, everybody's going to have to play their part to help this offense move along if Sellers maybe isn't exactly 100% and is limited in some ways. Now, again, we hope he goes out there and is able to run all over the place, and we come in here on Monday and talk about, there's the offense that we're looking for. But until proven otherwise, you can't guarantee that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And, Luke Doty's going to run the football for sure. We saw that against Vandy, right? Showed a little shake, a little shimmy in the open field. I remember at the beginning of the season saying Luke Doty's like the ice cream machine at McDonald's at quarterback. Like, when it's working, it's awesome. So, if you can find a little bit of that Doty magic, we could see him running the football a lot and see what this offense would look like, when guys are taking off. But certainly not 16, right? Certainly not as big and as quick as Lenoir Sellers. But, I think either of those two guys, we're going to see a little bit more of an opened up playbook, if you will. And at the very basis of it, you got to, establish a run game. So looking at the running backs, looking at the wide receivers too, if it's not Sellers, it's got to be the surrounding cast.
We'll talk more about this a little bit later on in the show. But coming up next is wrap-up hour number 1. There's a Thursday night football game on tonight on Amazon Prime, and one team is going into this game not looking too good. We'll discuss that coming up next as wrap-up hour number 1. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave on your Thursday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave along with you here on your Thursday on the game. I've finally got a little bit of caffeine in me, so I'm back rolling again. I was slipping there in that last segment, so I'm recharged and I'm good to go now.
Yeah, Tyler unfortunately couldn't provide the caffeine today, as I'm a little banged up on the IL here, if you will, or the temporary IL. So glad you got your caffeine again, carrying a big chunk of the station today again, so shout out, man. You need it.
Yeah, I do. Once you get into hours 4, 5, and 6, that's where the grind really starts with all this kind of stuff. So recharged and good to go. Hopefully I'm still awake and active at 8:15 tonight when we get it's week 3, but it's really like only the second actual Thursday night football game because I don't count week 1 because, again, you haven't played the week prior. This is where we start to get into the games looking a little bit funky, and I think we have what could be the ugliest matchup of Thursday night football this year with the Bills taking on the Dolphins. Because you got one team that once again looks like it's a legitimate Super Bowl contender in the Buffalo Bills, and another one where we might be quite literally counting the days until Mike McDaniels gets fired.
Yeah, absolutely. Two different, franchises here going in opposite directions. I don't want Mike McDaniel fired. I don't know, like the Finns, obviously Darius Rucker's team. But I don't know. I'm interested. It would be interesting to see where Darius stands on all of this too, because again, diehard Finns fan somehow, even being from the Carolinas and whatnot. But yeah, I don't understand it. Mike McDaniel's good for football. I like his offense. When it's clicking, it's humming. It's really fun to watch. When they were scoring 71 points on the Broncos, I believe it was. That was fun to watch. Like you were just watching to see how many points it could score and just watch Tyreek and their dynamic playmakers go off. But certainly been a change of scenery down there in Miami. No life really in those players, and they had a players-only meeting after week 1. Tyler, that's usually not a good sign. There's 17 weeks of football. Like it's a little early and not a good sign for McDaniel. Again, Miami Mike, I guess, is just settling in and staying complacent. That's not what you want to do if your seat's getting a little warm down there.
By the way, you can listen to that game here on the Game Tonight immediately following Carolina Calls with Coach Beamer and Todd Ellis right here on the Game. Mike McDaniel's also had some very weird quotes in the media the past couple weeks, including one the other day. This will be cut number 29 here, Dave, talking about to win the games, you have to win the game and not lose the game. I don't know. Listen to it for yourself.
To win games, you have to win the game, not lose the game, honestly. And that is how you lose the game. You're moving the ball down the field. You're 1st and 10, and then you find yourself at 2nd and 20. That was critical.
Was he channeling his inner Herm Edwards there, where you play to win the game? Because I don't know what point he was trying to make there.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the game within the game, which is stay focused all the way through, but that's part of the game, Mike. I don't know. It sounds like he's lost the locker room, or lost these guys. If you're going down, you're having a successful drive as he was describing, and then somehow you end up 2nd and 20. I don't know. Seems like they're losing focus, and seems like Mike's a little frustrated with it. It's going to be a long season if it's going like that, if they can't turn things around. Again, I love Mike McDaniel. I think he's been a breath of fresh air to the NFL, but man, oh man, if things keep going this way, man, he's going to be out soon.
It's a classic example of when things are really, really good, or things are good, they're really good. When things are bad, they're really bad. And again, he comes in as this cool dressing, witty, dry humor type of coach that we haven't really seen in the NFL before. And again, he's got this innovative offense that's putting up, 40, 50 points in some games. He's got this dynamic playmakers like Tyreek Hill. Tua is working perfectly in that offense. And when it's great, everybody's loving it. It's all good. But when things start to get a little bit tricky, he's not the kind of coach, because he's very much like the player friend type of coach, not the hard-nosed type of coach. And according to reports that I've been reading, he's kind of tried to shift that this offseason leading up into this year, where he's tried to be harder on the guys. But it's kind of one of those things that once you kind of let the toothpaste out of the tube, that you're the fun-loving buddy type of coach, it's kind of hard to become the disciplinarian. And I think he's learning that one the hard way. And again, I mean, Tyreek Hill basically said at the end of last year, I don't want to be here anymore. Still on the team, but those feelings don't really change.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. It's impossible to do that. Go from a player's coach into more of a disciplinarian within the same job. I think without having it all fall flat on your face like we're seeing from McDaniel. I don't know why the switch or something like that. Maybe he just got tired of his players or frustrated. I think that's more or less where it comes from players coaches when you're buddying them up and everything, and then they just start underperforming or performing less to the capabilities. And McDaniel's certainly trying to make the switch, but I don't know how much is working. Again, he's way better as a player's coach and a lot better when he's more involved, I guess, and closer to some of these guys.
So again, that game coming up tonight, which you can listen to right here on the game, as the Bills look to get themselves to 3-0, while the Dolphins try and avoid going 0-3 to start the season. A very critical matchup there in the AFC East. Speaking of matchups, we'll take a look at some of the more interesting games around college football coming up in week number 4 as we start hour number 2 of the halftime show, presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Up next on your Thursday here on the game. All right, welcome back in. It is hour number 2 of the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Thursday on the game. I mentioned in that last segment, Thursday Night Football, of course, coming up tonight at 8 o'clock here on the game, immediately following Carolina Calls with Coach Beamer and Todd Ellis. And before that, you can go and hang out with the post-game show. They're going to be live at Old Mill Brew Pub over in my neck of the woods out there in Lexington at 711 East Main Street, hanging out from 3 until 6 so they get you set for another full weekend of football ahead. So a very busy Thursday here into a busy Friday. We also have the high school football scoreboard show with Elijah Campbell and Justin Hall ahead of another full weekend of high school football action across the state of South Carolina. I'll check in with Justin Hall tomorrow morning about all the games going on across the state tomorrow evening as well. But Joe, man, we're excited for another full weekend of college football as well. I keep waiting for a full weekend of conference play. And unfortunately, we keep getting teased, right? Like last weekend when we had a couple conference games, including Carolina and Vanderbilt, Arkansas and Ole Miss played kind of a wild game. You at least had A&M taking on Notre Dame in a high-profile game. But, man, it's kind of slim pickings across the board in the SEC this upcoming weekend in terms of conference stuff because South Carolina at Missouri is one of the few conference battles we actually get.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyler, I'm with you. I'm just ready for a Saturday full of SEC football where you can just, turn on the SEC network to catch all of the kind of background games and then flip back forth to ACC to catch the rest of the main conference action. But we get a little tease here. I mean, this will be Oklahoma's first test with Auburn, and we're interesting to see where that Auburn team is, playing essentially cupcakes up until this point besides Baylor. And in that Hugh Freeze era, if Hugh Freeze is going to be sticking around for much longer, I don't know, they're getting to better football here as of late, but we'll have to see. First real test in Oklahoma.
Does Jackson Arnold get heckled this entire game returning to Oklahoma?
I would think so, Tyler, especially because they found the new shiny toy in John Mateer. They've already moved on, if you will.
But I was going to say, that's my thing is they've got a better deal than what they thought they had a year ago. I don't think they'd still be upset about that, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I guess a little less vain, if you will. They're probably all right, yeah, in a better spot. True. I don't know. I think you'll still get a fair share of boos because it's the SEC. I don't know. That's interesting again to see because they're in a far better spot. But then I'm sure if Arnold comes in and starts making plays, the attitude's going to change pretty quickly. Because
remember, Carolina went to Oklahoma mid-October last year, and by that point they'd already benched Jackson Arnold and had Michael Hawkins Jr. playing, and we knew at that point in time, we're like, oh, this guy's he's going to transfer. There's no reason for him to stay. He feels like he's been betrayed at this point in time, and when he did eventually transfer to Auburn, it made a lot of sense, and it's a situation where, again, Mateer has come in and done a phenomenal job as Oklahoma's quarterback, and we'll get to the Heisman updates, coming up a little bit later on, as he looks like he could be in the driver's seat to win the Heisman Trophy this year. And Jackson Arnold has looked very solid so far in his time at Auburn, under Hugh Freeze now, at the helm and all that kind of stuff. So it really kind of worked out for both sides. And I think for Oklahoma, really both these programs came into the year knowing their coaches were in hot water, right? If Venables went 6-6 again, he's gone, right? Because that's unacceptable at Oklahoma. And they've been waiting for Hugh Freeze to click things into gear on the Plains since he's been there so far, and it hasn't happened. Obviously, it looked a whole lot better this year. So this game, doesn't doom one program if they lose this one, obviously, because there's a lot more football left to be played. But the winning program is going to be riding pretty high coming away from this and saying, hey, we're really something here as you get into conference play.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. I'm leaning a little bit more towards Oklahoma since they've, showed that they're, I guess, just a better football team with the wins. I think I don't know if it's fair to compare Michigan and Baylor, but, I don't know. I think Auburn has a real chance to win this football game. I wouldn't, chart them out as well as they played. It seems that they found, some gears of good football. Years past, I think Hugh Freeze has kind of struggled through these first couple games, right? And everyone, starts beating the drum early. Okay, he's next guy out of here and who are we bringing in next and whatnot. But, certainly giving himself a fighting chance to hold on to his job. And if he wins this football game, certainly rewriting the story. But I don't know, Tyler. I think this Oklahoma team's, pretty high powered. I'm excited to watch it. Nonetheless, should be a pretty good football game, exciting football game, and it'll be, the first, I guess, real SEC test for this Oklahoma team who has a lot of momentum right now.
We have a very big revenge game happening this weekend with one SEC team. People have forgotten about this, but because the Alabama win last year, Vanderbilt lost to Georgia State last year in Atlanta early on in the season. They had beaten Virginia Tech in overtime. They had lost to Mizzou in overtime, and I want to say it was like week number 3 when they went into the former Turner Field, now Central Park Stadium in Atlanta, and lost to the Georgia State Panthers. They now get the Panthers back in Nashville this time. They're 27.5-point favorites. You think they might take out some frustration on them for what happened a year ago?
Yeah, I would think so. Vandy's going to try to keep going with momentum, but I don't know. As nature of college football, this game could be a slugfest, Tyler.
Yeah.
As well as they played last week, and I wouldn't put it say Vandy's going to come out complacent and flat. We haven't really seen that besides the Georgia State game, if you will. But I don't know. I think the way college football has been shaping and as much momentum and happiness is up there in Nashville right now. I think that you have to be a little optimistic. I would think they're going to try to run up the score for sure, or try to let some frustrations out. But I don't know. I could see it being a slugfest as the way college football has gone recently.
I would say so. They've got their second conference game on the road at Alabama coming up at the beginning of October. If that game was next week, I would say that, hey, Vanderbilt might have a little bit of a letdown look ahead type thing coming off of a big win last week, and then having Alabama on the road after that, to where I might say, hey, Georgia State can make this interesting, but they got Utah State next week. They'll be fine. They're back at home. Right. I have a feeling, based on what we saw last week, I don't think Vanderbilt should have a problem with Georgia State for the second year in a row.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. Again, Clark Lee going to check every box, and we've seen what happens when this team, this Vandy team wants to avenge a loss, let alone 16 straight. I wouldn't put it past Vandy, again, to take out some frustrations. The Diego Pavia train is gonna keep rolling, and, no update on, I guess, the date.
Yeah. Do you think Billy Napier is mad that their game against Miami is the College Game Day game of the week? For one, it doesn't make any sense. I think they should have gone to either Auburn and Oklahoma or Indiana and Illinois, because those are two ranked versus ranked matchups that are compelling stories. But you're basically at this point publicly shaming Billy Napier by putting his team on national television for the game Saturday night at 7:30 on ABC, but also having the entire pregame show where they can talk about how bad of a shape this Florida team's in right now.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And I don't know, anybody in Gainesville is excited for this game. I guess maybe the in-state rivalry, is the hype. But, just in the momentum that Miami has, I guess, fresh off the win against Notre Dame, and they were able to, topple USF too. But I don't know. I'm with you. I think this game should be out, or the game day should be out in Oklahoma. For that game, or out on the plains, excuse me, because that game's at Auburn, right?
No, the game's in Oklahoma.
In Oklahoma. Okay.
Well, and I would have. So let's see. They were at Ohio State
Michigan.
and Texas for week number 1. They were at Michigan, Oklahoma for week number 2. Last week they were at Georgia, Tennessee, and again, we're all SEC people here, but I do like it when they mix it up and go to different places. And I think the dynamic of Illinois and Indiana being two teams that for the better part of the past couple decades have been largely irrelevant in the Big Ten, to be fighting for a quasi playoff spot maybe in terms of hey, who can be the Indiana from last year? I feel like that's too good of an opportunity to pass up. I don't know why they didn't opt to go to that game.
Yeah, most definitely. There's some hype behind Cignetti at Indiana, and then I think South Carolina fans are certainly rooting for Indiana against Illinois in this one. And knowing how both teams schedule nowadays, this is essentially their quasi first playoff game, if you will. If both teams, expect to make it, both teams don't schedule anybody, right?
Yeah.
So this is a big game, in terms of the greater scheme of it all. The Big Ten is not. It's deep, but I don't know how. If it's carrying you all the way to the playoffs, you gotta win this one. And must wins don't. I guess coming early in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that I think everybody in the Gamecock fandom is going to be pulling for the Hoosiers in this one. Though Kirk Cignetti has rubbed people the wrong way with some of his comments in the offseason, to where maybe he's a little bit harder to root for. And you're you're raising your hand on that one. But yeah, the Brett Bielema has become public enemy. Maybe not number one, because I think Dabo still occupies that spot pretty heavily, but maybe number two in the hearts of Gamecock fans.
Yeah, most definitely. Again, everyone rooting for the Hoosiers again this weekend. I certainly got tired of today's antics. I was pointing to the picture of the college football playoff game.
I see that. I got you. Okay, that makes sense.
Hometown Notre Dame Fighting Irish and Indiana. So yeah, but again, rooting for the Hoosiers this weekend against Illinois.
They're just spinning around the SEC for week number 4. Earlier on this morning, we talked with Will Helms, who does analytics for Gamecock Central. Gave a lot of insight into what happened this past weekend against Vanderbilt and looked ahead to Missouri this weekend as well. We'll replay that conversation for you coming up next as the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina rolls along on your Thursday on the Game. Tyler Ed here for our friends over at Old Timey Meat Market. There's no home game this weekend for South Carolina, but that doesn't mean you can't get out there and still hop on the grill with some family and friends at home or hanging out by the lake or whatever it may be. And if you're going to be doing some grilling, you need to make sure you get yourself down to Old Timey Meat Market, where you'll find their shelves stocked with various cuts and grades of beef, pork, poultry, seafood, and exotic meats. Their selections are always fresh, never frozen, competitively priced, and of the highest quality. You can get all that you need in their locations at St. Andrews, Congaree, as well as out in Lexington, where I like to hang out at. And also, when you're grilling, you need to have the right tools to do it with, which would include a Traeger grill. And Old Timey Meat Market has plenty of pellets, rub sauces, and accessories too to go along with your Traeger grill. And you can head out to the Lexington location. Again, in my neck of the woods, check out their location, or excuse me, their offering of Traeger grills at Old Timey Meat Market. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave hanging out with you on your Thursday here on the game. A couple things that we need to note on we haven't got a chance to talk about in the show yet today. Was waiting on an update. Obviously, if you haven't heard the news, former Gamecock quarterback Connor Shaw, terrifying situation last night out in Simpsonville as he collapsed while watching his son's football game out there, got rushed to the hospital where, according to a statement put out by the hospital a little while ago, he is in stable condition, did have to go to intensive care there at Greenville Memorial Hospital, but according to the statement, he is in stable condition, and obviously, thoughts and prayers and wishing the best for him and his family, because that's a situation that obviously nobody wants to have to deal with. And again, you've seen in the past, not even 24 hours now, but the outpouring of support and love. He obviously means a lot to this this fan base, this community. And I even saw an article by John Whittle. He's even up here in Columbia earlier in the day before this happened. So good to hear he's in stable condition and hoping for a speedy recovery there.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Prayers for Connor Shaw, man. Prayers for 14. One of the most legendary quarterbacks in this program's history, and one of the best ambassadors of the program as well. You wish the best for him and a speedy recovery, as you mentioned. It's been a weird string of things for this Gamecock community, so just hoping everybody gets healthy, man.
Yeah, again, that's according to a statement by the hospital itself saying that he is in stable condition, and we'll await further updates as time goes along. Some more positive news. You mentioned on the front of weird things that have happened with Gamecock, just football specifically here as of late. Of course, Travian Robertson involved in a terrifying accident of his own prior to the season starting. Head-on collision. The party on the other side of that accident did unfortunately lose their life. We know T-Rob has been in the hospital banged up, as you would imagine, in the weeks since. He has been released from the hospital. He is back home, and we did hear from Coach Beamer and Coach White that he has made some appearances at practice earlier on this week, and we finally saw a picture yesterday of him up in one of the towers watching practice, had a headset on. He is apparently using a wheelchair, does have a walker in the picture as well. So it's probably going to be a pretty long road of recovery, but good to see that he is at least to the point where he can get back out there and be a part of Carolina football to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Yeah, it's huge for T-Rob to be back out there, I guess, up in the box and whatnot as he still works through his rehab. Talk about another legendary Gamecock who came home and is coaching at this program now. One of the better forces, and his defensive line unit has taken steps these last couple of years under his guidance. So it's good to get him back. And also, hat tip to Jordan Dove and everything that he's been able to do while T-Rob has been out. That unit is really tight-knit. And so to have T-Rob there in any capacity, I'm sure the guys were, through the moon. And, it's good, that we continue to see him progressing because, again, you'd like to have him back as soon as possible.
Yeah, we don't have a timetable on when he'll be able to, reacclimate into the role of being the full-time defensive line coach. Again, Jordan Dove, as you said, has done a really good job through these first couple of weeks, has taken on that role. And obviously we've seen a lot of good things out of that defensive front in the first couple games this season. But again, when we look at the picture and obviously understand the accident that T-Rob was a part of a couple weeks ago, it's probably going to take a lot of steps and take a lot of therapy and rehab and all that kind of stuff to get him back to where he wants to be. But it is good for one that he's alive, right? Because that is one of those situations that could have certainly been a whole lot worse on his end when you talk about being involved in a head-on collision. But good to see that he is working back and being able to be involved with the team in any capacity that he possibly can be.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And again, another lesson that goes to show you, not to drive under the influence. I believe, his lawyer released a statement yesterday and said there was alcohol involved to some extent in that crash. Obviously not on T-Rob's side, but on the other driver thing. So, just more of an example not to drive under the influence and stuff and get an Uber. I mean, it's so accessible nowadays. And again, thank God T-Rob is still here and still fighting the good fight. And again, still some rehab to go, but Jordan Dove done a really good job. And again, I'm sure those guys are great with it. Any little dose of T-Rob they can get at this point.
Yeah, again, Beamer said earlier in the week, it was obviously great morale for everybody to see him after practice the other day. And again, if he was able to be out there and even just observe things. That's obviously a big plus, and certainly continuing to wish him the best as well as he tries to get himself back to to 100%. So that's the update that we have on him as of right now. Again, like I said, they put out the statement and involved in some legal stuff with what happened in that crash, and again as well, Connor Shaw in stable condition according to a statement put out by the hospital after his collapse last night at his son's football game. So again, wishing the best to both those guys, and hopefully we continue to get some more positive news about Connor in the next couple days and hours, and we'll try and keep you as updated as we can as we continue to learn things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Godspeed to both those gentlemen, man. They certainly need it. Keep the prayers going. Gamecock Nation, it's certainly a powerful thing.
We'll get back into the discussion of South Carolina and Missouri coming up next as we dive into hour number 3 of the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, along with you on your Thursday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. Hour number 3. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head and Joe Machika hanging out with you, Captain Dave as well, on your Thursday here on The Game. Reminder today, got a lot going on. Got the post-game show coming up in the next hour. Going to be live from Old Mill Brew Pub at 711 East Main Street out in Lexington. Go hang out with the crew over there. Tonight, 7 o'clock, Carolina Calls. Your last chance to hear from Coach Beamer. Have Saturday's matchup against Missouri. And then following that, Thursday Night Football, Dolphins and Bills tonight here on The Game as well. And tomorrow, we got High School Football Scoreboard Show that rolls us into, from 7 to 11, that rolls us into another full weekend of football action. And, of course, our main focus is what's going to be happening with South Carolina and Missouri Saturday night at 7 o'clock, which you can also listen to right here on The Game. And, man, there's no two ways about it. This kind of feels like a make-or-break game where, you already feel like you're behind the 8 ball a little bit by losing to Vanderbilt. Considering what you have left on your schedule, being 0-2 in conference play and 2-2 is not an option if you want to have the kind of success you were hoping for coming into this season.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I think this is a big game up there in Como for South Carolina. You have to find a way to regain momentum after Vanderbilt, came into your own barn and took it away from you, essentially. You got punched in the mouth and couldn't really respond against Vandy. So, obviously college football, you control your own destiny, and, certainly a big tilt up there in Como with Missouri ranked 25 and as good as they've been playing recently, running the football, throwing the football, and defensively, Eli Drinkwitz has these guys ready to go. So South Carolina certainly going to have to be on all of their P's and Q's and certainly be a disciplined football team this weekend.
So this line early on in the week opened up about 12.5, 13 points. Of course, that was on the heels of Sellers being injured in the Vanderbilt game last week. Looking at the line right now, this per ESPN bet, it's come down to 9.5, and I imagine that has a lot to do with the fact that Sellers looks like he's trending towards playing as of right now. Was listed as questionable last night on the first availability report of the week. Pete Thamel of ESPN did report that his sources tell him that Sellers was practicing. To what degree, we don't know. That doesn't mean he's a full participant. He just did something in practice at some point this week. And as Beamer alluded to earlier on this week, they do have a policy. If you're not practicing on Tuesday or Wednesday, then you're not going to be able to play in this upcoming weekend. So has he at least been able to check that box? What shape he's in, what percentage is he at, we don't really know, and we're going to probably not know anything until Saturday when it's game time, because I think he's just going to continue to be questionable on these availability reports.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I know we're going to rewind it here in a little bit, but, it's a little bit of gamesmanship from Shane Beamer in response, I'm sure, to Brady Cook's questionable or doubtful listing that he had leading up to the game last year. A concussion is something that you don't necessarily want to mess with, but if he's practicing, I think that's a good sign for Lenore Sellers' health, but we'll have to see. I think this offensive line, too, it's this game protection is going to be huge, especially kind of coming off of the type of injury, right? Concussions can kind of happen anytime, right? Not only the head-to-head, but also, you get some whiplash headed towards the ground and stuff like that. So going to need to protect the quarterback in this one. And, I don't know. I think his health is still kind of up in the air, considering everything we saw last year from Eli and the way he handled the Cook situation. Are we really going to know if Lenoris is going to play in this one? I don't think up until kickoff.
Well, if he does play, protection's going to be more important than ever, making sure that he's not in a situation where he could get hurt again or re-aggravate, the concussion issues from this past week. And yesterday, Mike Shula, when talking to the media, was asked about how he assesses the offensive line's performance so far this year. Cut number 1, Dave. This is what Coach Shula had to say.
Well, I think, again, I think I answered this question last week, too. I mean, I think offensively, we've done some good things and we haven't done some good things. I think they fall in the line with a lot of us. So yeah, we just keep working on consistency. As an offense, the negative plays kill you. It's pretty cut and dry. You keep the ball moving forward, you stay out of the negative plays, you get a better chance to move the ball and score points. So can't get the ball moving backwards, can't have the ball moving backwards, however it is, whether or not it's up front, whether or not it's another position. Again, offensive line a lot of times gets noticed, sometimes for the wrong reasons, or they get noticed when something negative happens. But there's a lot of good going on there. All I know is our guys practice hard. They're getting better as with experience, whether or not they're young guys or new guys to our system. But we have to be better as an offense.
Well, I would venture to say the only time we talk about the offensive line is when something goes wrong, because the best offensive linemen don't get discussed at all because they're doing their job and they're not letting guys through, or they're opening up holes, those kind of things. When we do talk about the offensive line, typically it is because something has gone wrong or a mistake has been made.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. I don't know. I think, it's this offensive line needs to play better, period. There's still gaps, I guess, going into week 4. Not necessarily something you want to be talking about this late, or I guess this early in the season, this late into the season. The offensive line should usually be shored up by week 2, week 3, even so. But, you've got to be really good against this Missouri defense, especially considering your quarterback's a little banged up. And if, he doesn't play, you're going to have to be really, really good for Doty. Again, he knows the offense well, but, doesn't have quite the same ability to escape the pocket as 16 does.
Well, and one element of last night's availability report that we haven't really touched on is the fact that Cason Henry wasn't on it. And Cason Henry did go out pretty early last week in the game against Vanderbilt. They had to bring in Tree Babalade to play the right tackle spot, and for as limited of an action as you saw last week, and he was only credited with being on the field for 6 snaps. Cason Henry's actually played pretty well this year. He, according to Pro Football Focus, is the highest graded pass blocker for South Carolina this year on that offensive line. And again, we were rightfully critical of him a year ago, and he's been around campus for a couple of years but dealt with a lot of injuries. But he did struggle a lot last year, as did Josiah Thompson at those respective tackle spots. But give credit where it's due. He's looked a whole lot better this year. Still a ways to go, as with everybody on this offensive line, in terms of being where you want them to be. But it's good that the guy that, again, is grading out as your best pass blocker is going to be available this weekend for South Carolina.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. Cason Henry, a guy that's dealt with his fair share of dings at his career at South Carolina. You're happy to have him back this week and full health too. Really talented guy out there, right tackle, and Tree came in and did well. I think Tree's kind of been that guy, the plug and play guy, if you will. For that right side. But yeah, Cason Henry, big body that you need back in there. And considering his experience with this offense, one of the more veteran guys on this offensive line. So need him, and certainly good to get him back, I guess, going up into Missouri.
So obviously that's going to be important from the protection standpoint to make sure that Sellers isn't getting hit. And if he is going to be running, making sure he's got good lanes to run through and all that kind of stuff. We saw I think, establishment last week of Rasul Faison as RB1, where he took pretty much all the carries for running backs in that game and had a solid game, all things considered. And maybe it was just kind of a ramping up process because he didn't get granted his eligibility until right before the season started. But I think we can say with a lot of comfort, and I get it, Oscar Attaway was also maybe a little bit dinged up going into last week's game as well. But I think it's very evident that Rasul Faison's going to be getting most of the carries with the running backs, going forward. And I think there's a vital importance placed on him this weekend as well to be able to take some of that pressure off Sellers, right? And the game plan for every defense is, hey, 16's their best player. We're going to take 16 out of it. We're going to make somebody else on that offense beat us. And up to this point, we haven't seen anybody really emerge and do that. And I think there's elements of Rasul Faison that show you he can be that guy. Again, he's got good moves, that lateral quickness, being able to cut, make guys miss, force missed tackles, and all that kind of stuff that could be very vital this weekend in Missouri.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. You're going to need everybody on this offense around either Lenoris or, Luke Doty, whoever it may be, to make plays. Again, I think Faison had his coming out party last week, against Vandy, got most of the carries. But, it's also going to be a protection thing. Like, can you protect the quarterback? And your pass blocking is going to factor into it. We know how much the week of practice factors in as well. But I would expect Faison and what he can do, outside the tackles and whatnot, to kind of lead the way again for this running back room. And, if he doesn't do a good job, you've got Attaway right there as well to kind of step up. We've seen what he can do as well. So maybe a fresh start for him is good as well. We'll have to see.
I brought this point up a little bit earlier talking with Wes and Chris, and we were discussing who could be, whether individual players or position groups, the most important ones to help out Sellers this upcoming weekend. And I brought up the tight ends. And when you look at what what Missouri does really well on defense. They're really good at getting after the passer and bringing a lot of pressure. And you look at their edge guys. You got Damon Wilson, Darius Smith, a couple of Georgia transfers that are really good at putting pressure on the passer. And again, with the concerns you've had with South Carolina's offensive line, I imagine Lenore Sellers is going to have his fair share of pressure in his face over the course of the game this weekend. So I think the quick game is going to become very, very important. Getting it off to tight ends out in the flat or dump offs, short little slants, those kind of things, which we've seen this year, whether it be with Brady Hunt, Jordan Dingle, guys like that. Sellers has got a good rapport with these tight ends as he had last year with Josh Simon as well. So I think they could become a very important part of this game, especially if the running game's not going, to be able to kind of almost operate as the run game when you're getting the ball out quick and hoping those guys can make guys miss and make some plays out in space.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Really looking forward to seeing the RPO game. You're going to need the fast play action there, quick decisions out of 16 if he's going to be back there, and you're going to need it out of Doty too. Certainly capable of doing things like that as well. But yeah, just quick game. If Lenore's is going to play, again, keeping his head out of jeopardy because it was a concussion that he went out with, last week. So try to keep him as a little to do with running the football or getting hit as possible.
Well, and we do have to always explore the possibility that, hey, what if it is Luke Doty, right? We feel good about Lenore Sellers' chances, but we can't say with 100% certainty that's going to happen. And look, we saw last week that Doty's ability to throw the ball down the field is not the same as Lenore Sellers, so you're not going to be having him push things vertically like you would with Sellers in there. So especially if Doty is your quarterback this weekend, that short stuff, the quick game, those kind of things are become vitally important with tight ends. Obviously, receivers find their way to get open. So, yeah, regardless of who your quarterback is, everybody on this offense is going to have to step up to some degree this weekend.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. Everybody, if Doty is the guy, you like him as your, I guess, QB2 right now, simply because of what he's shown you in practice, his comfortability in this offense, and his veteran leadership as well. Certainly can take you there. And you have two really underdeveloped guys in Aaron Noland and Cutter Woods. So I mean, a lot of people are kind of like, why are we throwing? You've heard the frustrations from this fan base of why are we throwing Doty in there? Why don't we just trot out Aaron Noland or Cutter Woods? It's because you'd be, I guess, in a lesser off position. That's how the staff feels. Both these guys are really underdeveloped, a true freshman, and then you see Aaron Noland, a sophomore coming in who hasn't really seen much college football either. So obviously, I would think Doty makes a lot more sense now at this point. And you trot out there who you're comfortable with, and Doty's certainly capable of doing things like we saw again last week. I always like to bring up the shake and shimmy we saw running the football in the open field. So capable of doing things, Luke Doty. And again, I think that veteran leadership and cool, calm collectedness and tight spots is kind of what's given him the job at this point.
Yeah, the experience matters a lot. And again, we have high hopes for both Cutter Woods and Aaron Noland as time goes along, but they just don't have the snaps at this point to where the coaching staff feels comfortable putting them into situations where things are on the line and the game's hanging in the balance like it would have been last week if they ended up playing. Now, I do think you could have maybe trotted Aaron Noland out there late when the game was already out of hand just to see what you have and if he could spark the offense a little bit more. Regardless, they didn't do that. And again, I'm hoping Sellers plays all 4 quarters on Saturday. We're not thinking about any backups or anything like that, though you always have to keep your mind open for those possibilities when you're dealing with a quarterback that is coming off of a concussion.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And again, we've talked again a lot this week of, the concussion talk and whatnot. I don't know. I still think there's a good chance that he doesn't play, even though he is practicing and whatnot. Just the gamesmanship, again, we'll do a little rewind here shortly. But, I know, like, Shane Beamer's certainly replicating the gamesmanship Eli Drinkwitz had with Brady Cook last year for sure.
You just mentioned it right there. We'll take a rewind look at what happened last year when Missouri came into Williams-Rice Stadium and how that ended for the Gamecocks at the end of the game last year. That's coming up next. Halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave on your Thursday on the Game. Tyrad here for the mortgage guru, Jacob Crowder, and First Palmetto Bank. If you're looking for a mortgage guru, Jacob Crowder's got you covered. He's helped so many 107.5 The Game listeners, and he can help you as well. We at The Game personally recommend him. Owner and operator right here in the Midlands, Jacob has local decision makers, which means quick and precise processing and underwriting. If you're looking to make a move, give Jacob a call at 803-719-1005 or email him at jcrowder@firstpalmetto.com. Interest rates have stabilized as well as the local housing market, and now is as good a time to buy a house as any. Jacob and First Palmetto Bank have products to help home buyers. If you're considering building a home, they have no-nonsense construction loans that fit your needs. Give Jacob a call at 803-719-1005. Jacob's MLS number is 198432, and First Palmetto Bank is a member of FDIC and an equal housing lender.
Second down and 3. 22 seconds remaining. 2 timeouts. Blitz by Missouri. Shuffle pass inside. Sanders inside the 10. 5. Rocket going for it. Touchdown Carolina. Touchdown Rocket Sanders. From 15 yards out. The game time.
Whoa! Yeah!
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no. Hell no. We just scored.
Oh my gosh. Shuffle pass.
Woo!
Listen to this crowd.
All right, right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. It's all right, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Thursday on the game. That was the call last year as the Gamecocks, in the waning seconds, were able to pull off the victory over Missouri 34-30, thanks to Rocket Sanders making the play of his one-year Gamecock career. Legitimately, I've been to now, this is my third year being able to be in person for these games. Loudest moment I've encountered so far when Rocket Sanders scored on that play, that little screen dump off there that he took in, because it's one of those plays you have the anticipation, right? Because he's running it in from several yards out to where like it builds and builds and builds, and when he finally crosses the line, there's like this explosion of sound that whether you believe it or not may have registered on the Richter scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out our guy Chris Jackson there, the Gamecock weather aficionado, if you will. I was at that game. I had some family in town, so I was able to go, sitting in the upper deck, and yeah, it was really loud. It was definitely swaying. As they say, Williams-Brice, if it ain't swaying, they ain't playing. But certainly felt like the ground moving underneath me in that upper deck. Most certainly, Tyler. It was loud. It was loud, man.
And that one came with 15 ticks left on the clock there. And this was kind of one of those games where you went through a roller coaster of emotions just there in a couple minutes, because Carolina had gotten themselves up 21-6 in this game, right before halftime. And you have Missouri come storming back there in the third and fourth quarter. They take a 22-21 lead early on in the fourth quarter. Carolina drives down the field, goes on a long drive, and takes the lead back 27-22. And if I remember correctly, I believe it was a fourth down that they got Missouri into there before Luther Burden scored that touchdown from Brady Cook. So, it really took the air out of the arena immediately after that. And then, you're tasked with, and this is not an easy position to be in, especially as a first-year starting quarterback, saying, okay, you've only got a handful of minutes left. You got to go down there and make something happen and score a touchdown or score at least a field goal at that point in time to force this game into overtime. And, credit to Lenore Sellers for getting the team in that position, and then Rocket Sanders for doing the heavy lifting on that final play to get them across the goal line.
Yeah, absolutely. They started playing the Rocky music right after that Luther Burden touchdown, and I think everyone within Williams-Brice was just kind of like, all right, like let's see what 16's got. So far to that point in the year, they hadn't really shown any fear in the fourth quarter, if you will. It's like, all right, let's see what they got on this last drive. But hat tip to Brady Cook and Luther Burden for that connection. Brady dropped it right in there. Burden made a great catch to hold on to it and give the game some more intrigue. But yeah, hat tip to Lenore Sellers too. Again, being cool, calm, collected in the fourth quarter. Obviously you were at home, so that helped. But it takes some guts to go down the field with no timeouts, I believe, and lead that game-winning drive.
And one aspect of this game that I think gets forgotten about a lot is it was definitely Lenore Sellers' best game as a passer. Yeah, he had some great runs in that game as well, but he went 353 through the air with 5 touchdowns and just 1 interception, completed 21 of 30 passes in this game. Like, I know we talk about his ability as a runner a lot, especially that being the hot button topic of the week, but man, a game like Missouri last year really proved to you how well he can spin the ball as well.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. His arm talent was, never really in question. Obviously, people talk about, the running ability more so as a quarterback because it's unique. But yeah, the arm talent is certainly there, and certainly his best best game as a passer to this point. And you'd like to see him replicated if he does get to go up there in Como. But we'll have to see. I think it's something that we've been waiting. I guess, or the Gamecock Nation has been waiting for it to kind of show its head in 2025. We saw the deep bomb to Harbor against Virginia Tech, but haven't really seen anything like it since. And we've seen quarterbacks struggle, I guess, early in the year to get into a rhythm and find what works for them through as the games progress. But still waiting to see that out of 16 this year. I think it's coming still, even with the concussion and whatnot and the setbacks early on. But have to dial in the passing game, and has been working with his wide receiver room a lot this offseason to get to that point. I think we're just waiting to see it show its head here in 2025.
Well, the most important element of that win last year against Missouri is you finally got over the Eli Drinkwitz hump, because he had your number in his prior years at Missouri. He had your number when he was at App State, going all the way back to 2019. Like, you just could not beat this guy. And again, it looked like, once again, like, oh man, you had him, you let him off the hook, and he's going to walk out of here with that smug grin on his face and have some kind of quip in the post-game, presser, and that didn't happen. So you finally got one over on him, and you hope that's enough to start building a streak against him now to where he doesn't get his lick back on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Eli Drinkwitz has been a thorn in South Carolina's side for quite some time now. And again, people just certainly aren't liking the Spurrier comparisons he's getting up there in Como either. So I don't know. I think this is a big opportunity for South Carolina to, keep a guy who's been a real thorn, down. And they're hungry up there at Mizzou somehow, Drink wants, the game back and then wants his streak back. So, got to come in if you're South Carolina, come in prepared, because that loss last year certainly hurt him on the road.
Yeah, it certainly did. And there's nothing he wants more than to be able to get that revenge back on South Carolina and put themselves in a good position to start the year 4-0 in conference play. And they're already ranked right now because again, last year people kind of looked at their schedule and said, that schedule's kind of light. They obviously want to make a push for the college football playoff themselves, and beating South Carolina, putting them down at 2-2 could certainly go a long way with continuing to bolster that resume for Missouri. So that's how they're looking at this side of things. But at least for last year, Carolina was able to finally get one back on Eli Drinkwitz.
Right. Yeah. Last year, one of the most electric games in Williams-Brice, to recent memory. And, we talk about the crowd pop too. It was kind of similar to A&M when you had that pick six, same kind of energy. That place was ready to, blow anyways as people were getting ready to storm the field there. But yeah, electric finish to the game last year, and South Carolina needs to do, a lot of the things they did well last year, carry that into this year. Need a consistent passing game and need to run the football, stop the run. Same old against Missouri. It's not like they've changed it up and whatnot. Stay disciplined as you head up there to Como this weekend.
Definitely so. And again, unfortunately, Como has not been a place that's treated South Carolina well over the years. So we're hoping to break that little bit of a streak as well that the Missouri Tigers do have over South Carolina out there in the other Columbia. We'll come back on the other side. It's been an interesting couple weeks in college football to start out the season, and our perception of who the best players in the sport are have shifted quite a bit. We'll take a look at the latest Heisman odds coming up next as the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina rolls along on your Thursday on the Game. Tyler Ed here once again telling you about our friends over at Pro Swing Columbia. 2 locations out in Forest Acres and Chapin. You can always go by there and play on those golf zone simulators where you can play on just about any course all over the world. I'm also excited to tell you about their Fall League that's going to be starting up here in just a couple weeks. It kicks off September 29th, and you need to get in on that before the signups close. It's 12 weeks of league play at either one of their locations, again in Forest Drive or Chapin. They have anytime or dedicated league nights with advanced booking required, and they have flighted play for a level playing field. If you want to take part or have any questions about their fall league, you can give them a call at 803-528-1617, or you can always go online to check out all their other options at ProSwingColumbia.com. Pro Swing Columbia, check them out in Forest Acres and Chapin. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. It's all right, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Thursday on the game, getting you set for another full weekend of football action. Of course, our focus here is on what's happening at or in Como, the other Columbia, with South Carolina and Missouri coming up Saturday night at 7 o'clock. Things will get started Saturday afternoon with Gamecocks Game Day, which involves myself and Elijah Campbell this week, as we'll set the table for the game coming up that night. And then I'll be out at O'Hara's once again for the viewing party, which we always do whenever South Carolina has a road game. But an interesting little wrinkle this week is we're going to start something new as well. The early game, which is Elijah and Preston, I believe their buddy Nick from WIS is also going to be hanging out as well. They're going to have an online viewing party for this game. So you can tune in to the 107.5 The Game YouTube channel and watch the game along with Elijah and Preston. They'll be breaking down plays, reacting to things as they happen. I also think they said they're going to have a whiteboard, so maybe we'll get some X's and O's talk as well. So something we're going to do for the first time in our brand new podcasting space, which is right outside of our normal studios here. So looking forward to checking that out this weekend as well. That'll start right when the game does at 7 o'clock coming up on Saturday night. Joe, it's been an interesting start to the college football season, as I think some of the guys that we thought were going to be some of the best players have not quite turned out that way, and the Heisman odds reflect that. Now, unfortunately, and again, he's missed half a game because of injury. He sat out mainly the second half against SC State because they were far enough ahead in that game. So we've really only seen one full game of Lenore Sellers, and again, the running stats have not quite been there. Passing's been okay. It's not been spectacular necessarily in terms of lighting up the scoreboard. And because of that, and his Heisman odds have dropped quite a bit. Went from plus 1,400 to start the season to plus 5,000 now.
Yeah, Tyler. Lenore Sellers' Heisman odds dropping a little bit. As we've seen him fluctuate, for everybody, really. Arch Manning, certainly dropping as soon as his injury questions arose. And so, obviously Vegas not going to take any chances, having guys that are hurt, up, with better odds and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I don't know. It makes sense. And still plenty of football left, Tyler, for these both Arch and Lenore's to kind of work their way back into New York conversation for sure.
Well, and as fun as it was to be able to talk about in the offseason that you had a quarterback that was even being considered in the running for the Heisman Trophy, that is the least of concern for South Carolina football. You just want to get this offense clicking to be able to score a decent amount of points, whether Lenore Sellers puts up crazy stats or not. All that stuff is secondary. You just want to be able to have a functional enough offense to where you can win games consistently. And obviously the health of Lenore Sellers is the most important thing right now, as we hope he is going to be starting on Saturday as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I don't know if you saw the clip, but there was a clip of, after this Eagles-Chiefs game, as Jalen Hurts was taking a knee, Chris Jones says, you didn't have 100 yards, and Jalen Hurts is like, we got the win, for lack of a better words, if you will. And I think, Lenore Sellers, he's got to feel the same way. You got to feel the same way, if you want to have any individual accolades or success being talked around you for the rest of the year. So, I think it's less about the stats if you're in it, and, just let everyone else do the talking for you.
Some other players that, again, we had high hopes for going into the year have shifted quite a bit in terms of their Heisman odds. Obviously, Arch Manning was the guy coming into the year, being hyped up more than any quarterback we've seen, at least in a very, very long time, prior to becoming a full-time starter. And when you look at his first couple of games as the starter at Texas this year, they've not gone exactly according to plan, and the Heisman odds have dipped quite a bit because of that. When you look at a guy that was plus 650 to start the year, he's now dipped to plus 3,000, and there's debates going on within the Texas fan of, hey, is this guy even fully healthy right now? What's going on with him? His stuff hasn't looked good. He's got this weird sidearm motion. He's wincing when he throws. Definitely not the start of the season we expected out of Arch Manning.
Yeah, absolutely not, Tyler. Considering the name and everything coming into the season, maybe when his grandfather said, it might be another year in college, maybe he knew something that we didn't. And, Sark, obviously, with the wonky quote about the throw in motion and stuff like that. So maybe there have been injury, I guess, issues with Arch kind of going into the year, but we'll have to see. Certainly, plenty of football left for these guys to work their way into it. But, John Mateer, guys, other guys around the country making a better case for their name. And Mateer, big tilt this weekend if he can find a way to get it done, against Auburn. People are going to be talking about him probably up until the ceremony in New York, you would think.
Well, and among other issues going on down in Gainesville, Florida, DJ Lagway's Heisman train may have officially run off the tracks. You're going to be very hard-pressed to find a Heisman Trophy winner that threw 5 interceptions in one game, which is what DJ Lagway did this past weekend against LSU. And if I remember correctly, I think Kyle McCord may have thrown 6 interceptions in a game last year that derailed any hope he had of winning the Heisman Trophy, even though he was, I believe, the leading yardage passer in all of college football a year ago for Syracuse. But yeah, it's really hard to bounce back from a 5 interception game. And look, I'm not afraid to admit it. I was one of the ones that was on the DJ Lagway hype train a lot in the offseason because I believed in his athletic ability and what he had around him, going into his first full year as a starter at Florida. And man, it's been anything but that so far.
Yeah, Tyler, I was also buying into the Lagway Kool-Aid for sure going into the year. But, I don't know. I did a double take because I didn't watch that game, right? And I was talking to a buddy that was a Florida fan, and I was like, oh, how'd Lagway play? And he's like, 5 interceptions. And I'm like, 5? And he's like, 5. And it's like, oh, no, Billy might, and that's where everything has kind of come out of this Florida program, or the rumors that, is Billy making Lagway regress, and that might make him, get fired even sooner. So we'll have to see as that kind of goes on and develops. But I still think Lagway is a good quarterback. I don't know if this year's the year for him, considering, everything with Napier and the muddy waters that lie ahead for the rest of the season for that program. But I still think the Lagway hype train's still, on the tracks, if you will, not for this year, but still a really talented quarterback they have in Gainesville. They just got a lot else to figure out before, they can address that one.
As far as the hype in the offseason, a lot of the buzz centered around John Mateer going into Oklahoma, put up some great numbers at Washington, though I think a lot of us were skeptical of, okay, can he do that against Power 4 competition? Now, we've only seen one game of him doing that against Michigan a couple weeks ago, but man, he has certainly looked the part. I'm excited to see him in this matchup against Auburn this weekend, where he'll play a quality defense and see what kind of numbers he can put up. But he, and believe it or not, Carson Beck, among the favorites to win the Heisman Trophy right now, is, I think a lot of people, including myself, were down on him after a less than stellar year at Georgia last year, had the injury in the SEC championship game. We didn't know what kind of shape he was going to be going into the year, but man, he's gone out there and proven a lot of people wrong early on in the season.
Yeah, still early. Still Carson Beck to kind of do what he did at Georgia and, muck it up a little bit. But, yeah, certainly a revitalized player and a new offense down there. And Mario Cristobal and whatnot in Miami. So, yeah, Carson Beck doing a 180 and John Mateer certainly, having his first real test against Auburn this week. I'm interested to watch that football game, see how they play because, I could go either way leaning Oklahoma right now. But, Hugh Freeze and this Auburn team have been doing their job through the first couple weeks, even though he's been, on the hot seat. 2 coaches that were both on the hot seat, I guess, at the beginning of this year. So it'll be interesting to see if Mateer can kind of lead his team throughout the game. I think if he does, he's, again, probably a shoe-in for New York to that point if he does his job and plays somewhat relatively well. But certainly leading the case right now. And Carson Beck, again, if he dominates Florida, the hype train is going to be real for the Beck case too as well.
Yeah, look, it's a long season. We're only basically a quarter of the way through it right now. Our opinions are going to shift on these guys a lot as the season goes along, but at least through the first month, you've seen Mateer and Beck maybe kind of separate themselves from the pack. Even a guy like Jeremiah Smith with Ohio State hasn't wowed necessarily the way that we thought he was going to, and I thought he had a very good case to win the Heisman Trophy this year, given his production as a true freshman. So that has shifted a little bit as well, and it's quarterback award, so we always kind of look at quarterbacks first and foremost, and if I had to bet right now on one of these guys winning it, based on what I've seen so far, I'd probably go with Mateer.
Yeah, right. Tyler, I'm with you. Mateer, to this point, stable and consistent. If he can keep that going the rest of the year, with the schedule and who they play, I think he's a shoe-in for the Heisman. But again, it's plenty of football left for Arch Manning to either come back, or Lenore Sellers still again to work his way back into it.
Yep.
The concussion doesn't help, but certainly a wide open race again. As we get through the early portion of this season here, Tyler.
We'll see who's hoisting that trophy come early December. Speaking of trophies, I have some thoughts to share on the Mayor's Cup that South Carolina and Missouri are going to be fighting for this weekend, which will hit as we wrap up today's edition of the Halftime Show. Up next on your Thursday on the Game.
Hey, Joe, if you can, just take it because he's not back.
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Joe Machika, Captain Dave, along with you, wrapping up the show here on your Thursday on the game. As I mentioned a moment ago, we've got a trophy game this weekend, the Mayor's Cup, right? South Carolina and Missouri in what is a made-up rivalry. Can we be honest about that? This rivalry is not real. It's something that when Missouri came in the conference, they're like, hey, you need a rival. Carolina shares the same city name as you. Let's make that a thing. And, again, people care about the rivalry aspect of this about as much as you would expect them to, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. This is one of the more overlooked rivalries in college football. We talked about it a bunch this summer, the trophies and whatnot. I didn't even know this game had a trophy until I, started covering South Carolina. And with the Daily Gamecock, and they brought it into the press conference and said this is the Mayor's Cup, and this gave us a little pamphlet to learn all about it and all that. But I had no idea there was a trophy for this game until I got here.
Yeah, I do wonder because I don't think they had put it on display anywhere here at the school, right? Like, do we even know where it was from winning it a year ago?
I'm sure it's somewhere up in the football facility. I don't know. I would think it's not on campus or anything like that. Or it's not sitting at Russell House.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I go back to my list from earlier on this year, and I know I talked about this with you, where I went and I ranked every single rivalry trophy in college football, at least the ones that are still active. There's games that haven't been played in a couple years, so I didn't count those to make my job a little bit easier. So 82 total trophies is what I ranked back in early July. Do you remember where I put the Mayor's Cup?
Wasn't it like 82nd, 81st?
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't the worst of the worst. I put it 71st.
Okay, so yeah, towards the bottom.
Towards the bottom.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's not a very exciting rivalry trophy, even though the games have been exciting. I guess Missouri, giving you all that you can bear with in a rival, right? You want a little bit more back and forth if you're South Carolina, but I think last year's game would be perfect incitement of a rivalry, if you will.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It does kind of feel like, and maybe it's the Drinkwitz element of this, because he's a guy that's not afraid to have a snide comment here and there or whatever, and how entertaining last year's game was. Maybe there is something deeper to this than what it had been in years past. And there's been some crazy games in this rivalry, or there it is, me calling it a rivalry, in this series itself. So it's something that, I don't know, could maybe blossom into something more, especially if you continue to see Missouri every single year, which I wouldn't put as a high likelihood. And I know we're supposed to maybe learn all of our permanent opponents coming up on Tuesday. That's from Joe Castiglio, who's the athletic director at Oklahoma. I mentioned that ESPN earlier on today. I wouldn't venture to think Missouri is one of them. A&M might be, which, by the way, I put the Bonham Trophy at 46 out of 82, so kind of right there in the middle. But yeah, the Mayor's Cup to me just kind of plain, unimaginative. It's a cup. It looks like a trophy. Yeah, that's about it.
The Bonham Trophy is cool as all heck, Tyler, because again, it talks about the Alamo. There's some history to it. It's a bigger trophy. It's got some cool art on it. I don't know. The Mayor's Cup, simply it's the fact that it was a rivalry simply because the two places are named at the same. It's not a whole lot of emotion in that, right? But since these two teams have been playing closer games, and again, since Drink will throw the occasional comment out there, and he's not afraid to shy away from any love lost, if you will. I think it's kind of blossomed into something. If Carolina can go up there this weekend and maybe steal this game by maybe, I don't know, a couple points, maybe a touchdown or so, I think it certainly continues to blossom into one, and certainly makes a case for your rivalry. But I don't know if South Carolina fans really want Missouri on the schedule every year. It's kind of been the annoying little brother thing that's happened to win these last couple of years, and finally got over the hump last year, but hoping to do the same this year.
Well, regardless of how silly the trophy looks, I hope we at least start a streak with it by South Carolina starts the streak with it by winning the game coming up on Saturday, because that would be 2 in a row, and would probably bother Eli Drinkwitz even more, considering the fact that they're the favored ones in this matchup. Carolina looks like they're a little down right now, and that's the thing. When you look, and we talked about this yesterday, when you just really start doubting Carolina teams a lot, that's when Beamer, in the Beamer era at least, that's when they typically play their best and they really kind of jump up and surprise you. So maybe that's what we have in store, this weekend as they take on Missouri, and we can hopefully come back in here on Monday and talk about the fact that, hey, they got things right. They righted the ship a little bit, and then you're feeling a lot better about what lies ahead. Because, again, this was supposed to be the easier part of the schedule. Not that any part of your schedule is easy by any means, but the easier part compared to what you have starting in early October when you go on the road to Baton Rouge and have all those games against Oklahoma and Mateer, against Alabama, against Ole Miss, against A&M, against Clemson, all that coming down the pipe, where you would have liked to have ideally been in a situation where you're hopefully now 4-1 coming out of your first 5 games.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. Not to use a Dabo line here, but this is a game where you got to bring your own guts, man. You really do, especially on the road. It's going to be a tough atmosphere up there in Como. It's a night game. That fan base has been waiting for some good SEC football to be back there. And so it's going to be a tough environment. Beamer talked about it earlier this week too. Find your inner competitor this week if you're South Carolina, and can have a big opportunity to get things right back on track where that momentum was before the Vandy game. If they can steal a big one up there in Como this weekend, Tyler, certainly looking forward to it.
We will see what happens. We'll dive into our final thoughts on that coming up tomorrow, but coming up next is the post-game show live from Old Mill Brew Pub out in Lexington as Jay and Terry get you set for the full weekend of football ahead. And again, we'll be back tomorrow to continue to break things down and give our final thoughts ahead of South Carolina and Missouri. Joe, appreciate you filling in as always, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Can't wait, Tyler. Looking forward to it.
This has been the Halftime Show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina on your Thursday on the Game.